4:47 a.m., June 21st, 2026, 18 miles outside Bangor, Maine. 12 operators from the FBI hostage rescue team moved in 2 columns through a tree line soaked from 3 days of rain. Temperature, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. No moon. The old Aurora reagent logistics sawmill sat 200 yards ahead, a low, dark shape against a darker sky. Every window sealed from inside with plywood and heavy insulating foam. One exterior light, dead. The parking lot empty except for a single panel van parked flush against the loading bay. Rear doors facing the building. The entry team reached the eastern wall. 6 seconds to breach. 4 seconds. 2. The first charge blew the loading bay doors inward at 4:47 and 30 seconds. HRT moved through the smoke before it cleared. What they found inside that sawmill would be described in federal charging documents as a contained extraction facility, a phrase that covers 24 days, 1 missing scientist, and an intelligence program the Department of Defense had spent 11 years building. This is the story of how a defense geneticist vanished from a Bethesda parking lot on a Tuesday morning, how the FBI spent 3 weeks with no contact and no demand, and how a postal field inspector in rural Maine noticed something that 3 weeks of federal surveillance had not. The case unsealed in partial form by the Department of Justice on June 24, 2026. Redactions cover roughly 40% of the operational record. What follows is drawn from the unredacted portions and from charging documents filed in the United States District Court for the District of Maine. Dr. Marcus Halverson was 41 years old. He held a doctorate in forensic genomics from Johns Hopkins and had spent 6 years under contract with the Joint Service Genetic Intelligence Program, a Defense Department initiative that provides battlefield DNA identification for deployed Special Operations Forces. When a Special Operations unit needed to confirm the identity of a recovered person in the field, alive or deceased, the JSGIP provided the framework to do it within hours instead of days. Halverson was the program's senior contract geneticist. He was a civilian scientist with a security clearance at the TS/SCI level and a rental apartment in Bethesda, Maryland. He had no personal security detail, no panic button, no protocol for reporting an unscheduled absence until hours after the fact. On the morning of May 28, 2026, Halverson attended a quarterly review conference at a contractor facility in Rockville. The conference ran until approximately 1:30 p.m. At 1:44 p.m., building security footage showed him walking to his vehicle in the parking structure on level 3. He was alone. He carried a laptop bag over his left shoulder and held a paper coffee cup in his right hand. At 1:46 p.m., his phone went dark. It did not transmit again. No call, no text, no GPS ping. His absence was not flagged for 6 hours. A colleague noticed at 7:15 p.m. that Halverson had not returned calls. Bethesda police took a missing persons report at 9:40 p.m. The FBI's Washington field office was notified at 11:50 p.m. when a background check confirmed Halverson's clearance level and program affiliation. By 6 a.m. on May 29th, the Critical Incident Response Group had assumed primary jurisdiction. The SIRG's first 24 hours produced nothing useful. The parking structure's level 3 camera had experienced a recording gap between 1:43 and 1:57 p.m. 14 minutes of black. A maintenance log showed the gap had been reported as a routine system fault 3 days earlier. A forensic review confirmed the gap was induced. A device physically attached to the camera's junction box and recovered before investigators arrived. Whoever took Halverson had pre-surveilled the parking structure, identified the camera coverage, and inserted the gap before the abduction. That level of preparation had a name inside the SIRG. They called it signature planning. It meant the team was not improvising. They had done this before, or studied cases where others had. There was no ransom demand on day 1, no demand on day 3, no demand on day 7. The absence of a demand was itself the first serious problem. Kidnap for ransom operations make contact within 72 hours in the overwhelming majority of documented cases. The logic is straightforward. The longer a victim is held without communication, the more resources law enforcement dedicates to the search, and the higher the exposure risk for the captors. Professional operations make contact fast. They establish proof of life. They name a figure. They open a negotiation. This operation did none of those things for 24 days. The SERG ran every standard protocol. Halverson's financial accounts showed no unusual activity. His phone records showed no contact with foreign nationals in the preceding 60 days. His apartment was clean. His colleagues were interviewed twice. His work product, the JSGIP contract deliverables on his encrypted government-issued laptop, had not been accessed externally. The laptop had been left in his office. Whatever they wanted from Halverson, they wanted it from Halverson himself. That inference shaped the investigation for 2 weeks. Whatever the captors needed required Halverson alive and cooperative, which meant he was probably alive. And the delay in contact was intentional, not a negotiating failure, but a strategy. The SERG got the logic right. They built an accurate picture of what the captors wanted. What they couldn't do was find the room where Halverson was being held. By day 14, the investigation had produced 112 investigative leads. 67 had been closed as unproductive. 45 remained open. None pointed to Maine. The Bureau had focused its geographic search on the Washington metropolitan area, then expanded to a 6-state corridor. They ran license plate reader data from parking structures across the region. They reviewed security footage from transit hubs. They conducted 14 interviews with individuals from foreign intelligence services who had expressed interest in JSGIP-adjacent research in the preceding 18 months. 3 of those individuals were placed under enhanced surveillance. None led anywhere. The investigation was stalled. There is a difference between stalled and failing, but at day 14 with a missing scientist and no proof of life, that difference is difficult to explain to anyone with a stake in the outcome. On days 12 and 13, the SERG's Behavioral Analysis Unit produced an updated assessment of the captors' methodology. The assessment, partially unredacted in court filings, concluded that the absence of any contact demand was consistent with an operation aimed at technical extraction rather than financial leverage. The analyst noted that targeting Halverson specifically, rather than any of the 3 other senior JSGIP contractors with comparable access, suggested the captors had precise internal knowledge of the program's structure. Halverson's specialty, the secondary identification module, was the component most transferable to an outside party without requiring the full system infrastructure. Someone had done their homework on the program's internal structure before choosing their target. The assessment flagged this as indicative of either a penetration of the contractor network or a source within the Defense Department itself. Both threads were opened as investigative priorities. Neither had produced a result by the time the main lead emerged. On day 15, a SERG investigator conducted a second interview with Halverson's closest colleague at the JSGIP facility, a computational biologist named Dr. Rachel Sorrento. Sorrento had been interviewed once in the first 48 hours. The second interview was longer, nearly 3 hours, and focused on different questions. Rather than asking about Halverson's personal life or recent behavior, the investigator focused on his technical work. Specifically, what would someone need to reconstruct the secondary identification module from scratch without access to the program's servers? What materials, what equipment, what chemical reagents would be required? Sorrento walked the investigator through the process in detail. The resulting technical summary was distributed to the SERG command team the following morning. It included a specific list of consumable laboratory supplies that any working reconstruction effort would require. That list was forwarded to the USPS mail covers program as a search parameter. It reached Connie Whitman's desk in Boston 2 days later. On day 17, June 14, 2026, USPS Field Inspector Connie Whitman flagged an anomaly through the USPS mail covers program. Whitman was based out of the Boston regional office. Her portfolio included commercial mail fraud, illegal shipment detection, and delivery pattern anomaly analysis. She was conducting a routine audit of priority mail express shipments to addresses flagged as inactive commercial accounts. The Aurora Reagent Logistics address on Route 9 had been flagged as inactive since November of 2025, 18 months prior. The flag was a standard dormancy marker. No mail received for 90 or more consecutive days. Flags like this were generated automatically. Most resolved as either a business relocation or a permanent closure. Whitman reviewed them as part of a weekly audit batch. Aurora Reagent Logistics had received 11 priority mail express shipments in the preceding 27 days. Whitman pulled the sender manifest. The shipments originated from 2 scientific supply distributors, one in Boston, one in New Jersey. The items: reagent consumables, buffer solutions, enzyme stabilizers, disposable lab plasticware. The kind of supplies a working biochemistry laboratory burns through at a predictable rate. The property was a decommissioned sawmill, listed as mothballed, padlocked on county records since November 2024. Whitman ran the property records. County assessment confirmed the exterior status. She contacted the listed property management company. They had no record of any lease or sublease activity since the mothballing date. No utilities account was active under the Aurora Reagent name. No building permit had been filed for any renovation or reactivation. Someone was ordering reagents for a biochemistry operation at a building that did not, on paper, exist. Whitman filed her anomaly report at 2:17 p.m. on June 14th. Under USPS FBI information sharing protocols, reports of this category were routed to the nearest FBI field office within 4 hours. Whitman's report reached the Boston field office at 4:53 p.m. Here is what most people don't consider about federal tip routing. The system almost didn't work. The Boston field office's duty agent reviewed the report at 5:30 p.m. and assessed it as a commercial mail fraud matter, a relatively low priority category. He logged it for follow-up and flagged it for the Financial Crime Squad. Under standard processing, the squad would have reviewed it within 48 to 72 hours. It reached a SIRG liaison by accident. A Boston-based SIRG agent named Special Agent Dana Rourke was physically in the duty office at 5:45 p.m., collecting an unrelated document when the duty agent mentioned the flagged report. Rourke heard 2 words: reagents and abandoned. She pulled the report. She read Whitman's analysis. She sat with it for 90 seconds. Then she called the SIRG Command Center in Quantico. The call reached the SIRG duty commander at 6:08 p.m. By 6:40 p.m., a cross-reference search had been run. Any open federal kidnap case in the Northeast Corridor involving a subject with a science or laboratory background. 2 cases matched. One was a cold case from 2023. The other was Marcus Halverson. By 8 p.m. on June 14th, SIRG had formally designated the Aurora Reagent Logistics property as a priority investigative site. 4 hours after that, an HRT advance element was on the ground in Penobscot County. What was now clear. Someone was running a functional biochemistry operation inside a sealed sawmill in rural Maine. The why pointed in one direction. Halverson was being used to reconstruct or replicate something. The captors had taken him for laboratory work. They had given him the materials to do it. The charging documents have not fully answered how much Halverson was made to cooperate versus how much he withheld or stalled. The indictment references a written statement from Halverson describing his efforts to slow the work, to introduce procedural delays, to request reagents that were either unnecessary or incompatible with the stated protocol, as a method of extending the timeline without triggering a response from his captors. Whether those stalling tactics succeeded or the captors were simply patient is something the redacted sections presumably address in detail. What the unredacted record shows, after 27 days, the laboratory work was ongoing and incomplete. Whatever deliverable the captors intended to extract had not yet been extracted. There's a line in the indictment that reads like something from a technical manual rather than a criminal charge. It describes the target as, quote, proprietary derivative architecture embedded in the JSGIP secondary identification module, end quote. In plainer terms, the algorithmic core of the JSGIP's battlefield DNA identification capability. the code and methodology that allowed a deployed special operations team to confirm a human identity from a degraded biological sample within a classified operational timeline. The captors were not trying to sell Halverson. They were trying to make him reproduce his own work under controlled conditions so they could take it home. That tells us something about the operation the arrest counts don't capture. This was not a criminal kidnap for ransom. This was an intelligence collection operation that used kidnap as its mechanism. The distinction matters because it changes who ordered it, who funded it, and how far up a foreign intelligence chain of command the authorization went. The DOJ's charging documents describe the 3 arrested individuals as foreign nationals. Their nationalities are still redacted, and refer to their affiliation as a state-adjacent entity. The Bureau's internal designation, referenced once in an unredacted footnote, was, quote, a competent and patient extraction crew, end quote. Not freelancers, not criminal contractors, professionals operating under direction. The HRT advance element spent 6 days conducting site preparation before the breach authorization was granted. 6 days of thermal imaging, acoustic monitoring, and signals intelligence to map the interior of the sawmill without alerting the occupants. They identified 3 heat signatures in addition to Halverson. 3 handlers, maintaining a controlled internal environment, running what the technical brief described as a modified biological workspace in the mill's former secondary processing bay. They had converted approximately 1,800 square feet of the interior. Portable ventilation, generator power routed through the mill's existing electrical conduit to avoid an external utility account. Water fed from a stored tank system that explained the absence of a utility footprint. The operation had been designed to be invisible. It nearly was. The obstacle that nearly derailed the breach was the discovery, 18 hours before the scheduled entry, that the sawmill's internal layout did not match the county building records. The advance element's acoustic mapping showed an additional partition wall that did not appear on any archived plan. That wall created a secondary space, approximately 400 square feet, whose purpose could not be confirmed before entry. It might be storage, it might be an egress route, it might be a secondary holding space. The HRT commander, whose identity remains redacted in the public record, requested a 48-hour delay to gather additional structural intelligence. The request was denied at the SIRG command level. The reasoning: the reagent shipment schedule suggested the laboratory work was approaching completion. A 48-hour delay risked allowing the extraction to conclude and the captors to move. The breach was authorized for 4:47 a.m. on June 21st. Put yourself in the position of the HRT entry team, moving through a structure with an unmapped interior partition, in a building with generator power that could cut at any second, with 1 known hostage and 3 known handlers, and an unknown 4th space. That is not a comfortable tactical picture. It is where planning stops being useful and training takes over entirely. The breach took 4 minutes and 11 seconds from the first entry charge to the final clearance call. The loading bay doors came down at 4:47 and 30 seconds. The secondary entry point on the north face was breached simultaneously. The 2 columns converged inside the primary processing bay within 40 seconds. The 3 handlers were in the process of moving. They had not been alerted by surveillance. The advance element was confident of that. But the noise of the generator cycling down, a pre-planned action designed to force the occupants into motion, had done exactly what it was intended to do. 2 of the 3 handlers were moving toward the rear loading bay when HRT reached them. The 3rd had reached the bay door and had 1 hand on the exterior release mechanism. All 3 were in federal custody by 4:51 a.m. No shots fired, no injuries to HRT personnel. Marcus Halverson was located in the converted secondary processing bay, the room that matched the county building plans. He was found at a portable workstation, seated, with a handwritten notation page spread across the surface in front of him. His hands were unrestrained. A single overhead work light was on. He had been in that facility for 24 days. He was transported by helicopter to Eastern Maine Medical Center in Bangor. The flight took 19 minutes. During transport, A SIRG agent seated beside him noted that Halverson said almost nothing. He asked once whether the people outside had been stopped. When he was told yes, he nodded and looked out the window for the remainder of the flight. Physicians at Eastern Maine Medical Center described his condition as consistent with prolonged confinement and nutritional deprivation. He was admitted to the ICU for 72 hours of monitoring. The medical record noted significant weight loss from his baseline and evidence of chronic sleep disruption over an extended period. He was discharged on June 25, 2026. The unmapped partition room turned out to be a document and equipment storage area. Inside, 2 encrypted hard drives, a portable sequencing unit, and approximately 40 pages of handwritten laboratory notes in Halverson's handwriting. Those notes and drives are currently under forensic analysis by the Defense Intelligence Agency and the SIRG Cyber Division. The unredacted charging documents reference them only as materials of significant intelligence value. What they contain, how far the extraction had progressed, how much of the JSGIP architecture Halverson had reproduced under duress, remains classified. The 6-day delay between Whitman's anomaly flag and the authorized breach is difficult to defend. 6 days of HRT preparation is standard for a complex hostage recovery. But the routing failure that nearly sent Whitman's report into a 48 to 72-hour queue is a systems failure, not a procedural success. The case was effectively solved by an accident of timing, by the presence of one SIRG agent in one duty office at 5:45 p.m. on a Sunday. Remove that accident, and Whitman's report sits in a queue while a foreign intelligence operation completes its work, and 3 handlers drive a panel van out of Maine with 2 encrypted hard drives and 24 days of extracted science. The system produced the right outcome. The path to that outcome had a single point of failure that the system itself did not detect. The 3 individuals arrested at the sawmill were transferred to federal detention in Bangor and subsequently moved to a federal facility pending trial. They are charged under Title 18 of the United States Code, with kidnapping resulting in serious bodily harm, conspiracy to commit economic espionage, and theft of trade secrets, with an intent to benefit a foreign government or instrumentality. The espionage-adjacent charges carry potential sentences of up to 15 years per count under current federal sentencing guidelines for cases involving defense-related technology. Their nationalities remain under seal. The government's motion to maintain the seal cites ongoing foreign counterintelligence equities, meaning the investigation has expanded beyond the 3 individuals in custody. Someone directed this operation. Someone funded it. Someone chose Marcus Halverson specifically, which means someone with knowledge of the JSGIP program and of Halverson's role within it made a targeting decision. That person, or those persons, has not been named in any public charging document. What do you think was the intelligence failure here on the federal side, the academic side, or somewhere in the contractor vetting process that gave a civilian scientist TS/SCI access and apparently no enhanced physical security protocols? Comment below. The answers aren't clean, and neither is the accountability trail. The panel van, found parked at the loading bay, was registered to a Massachusetts logistics company that had reported it stolen on June 2, 2026, 9 days after Halverson was taken. The van's interior contained a second portable generator, 43 liters of additional reagent solution, and 2 burner phones. The phones have been analyzed by the SIRG's Technical Operations Unit. One returned no recoverable data. The other contained a single outgoing text message, sent on June 19th, 2 days before the raid, to a number that the FBI has publicly described only as a foreign registered endpoint. The content of that message is redacted in the charging documents. That message was sent. Someone received it. That person has not been found. There is also the question of the 14-minute camera gap in the Rockville parking structure on May 28th. The device that induced the gap was never recovered. The parking structure's vendor is a private security contractor with operations across 11 metropolitan areas. A review of that contractor's personnel records is referenced once, in a redacted footnote, as an ongoing investigative thread. No charges have been filed against any contractor employee. There's a detail that stayed with me going through the case documents. Something minor the charging language almost glosses over. The reagent shipments were addressed to Aurora Reagent Logistics by name, not to a fictional individual, not to a forwarding service, to the corporate name of a company that county records showed as mothballed. Whoever addressed those shipments knew that the postal system's automation would process a corporate name without triggering a delivery exception, but that a human auditor running an inactive account review would eventually flag it. They were right about the first part. They didn't count on Connie Whitman running that audit on that particular week. The SIRG's post-operational report credits the resolution to what it calls, quote, a combination of interagency information sharing and field-level analytic initiative, end quote. That is the bureaucratic translation of, one postal inspector noticed a number that didn't add up, and one FBI agent happened to be in the wrong room at the right time. 11 shipments, 27 days, one inactive corporate account. The JSGIP program resumed operational support to deployed units on June 23, 2026, according to a Defense Department statement that confirmed no classified algorithmic data had been successfully exfiltrated. That statement was issued 2 days after the raid. It is notable for what it does not say. It does not say no data was captured. It says no data was successfully exfiltrated. There is a distinction there that the department has not chosen to clarify publicly. The 3 individuals in federal custody will proceed toward trial in the District of Maine. The foreign entity that directed the operation has not been named. The individual who sent the June 19th text message has not been located. The full content of the 2 encrypted hard drives remains under classified review. Marcus Halverson was released from Eastern Maine Medical Center on June 25th. His contract with the JSGIP program is listed in court filings as currently suspended, pending a security review. The program that sent soldiers his work for 11 years is now auditing whether his work was taken. The sawmill on Route 9 is sealed. The county padlock is back on the exterior gate. From the road, it looks exactly as it did before. A closed building in a quiet stretch of pine forest that no one had reason to notice. Someone noticed an 11-item mail trail. Someone was in the right room. Someone decided to run an audit that week instead of the next. That is the distance between a recovered scientist and a completed intelligence extraction. 3 coincidences in a chain. The operation succeeded because each one happened. The operation could have failed if any one of them hadn't. The demand that created this operation still exists. The target program still runs. The next targeting decision has already been made somewhere. The next postal inspector may not be running audits that week.